Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to draw some textures. So first let's start off with one of the favorites, scales. People love to draw scales, but they tend to mess up a little bit by doing this. I'll do one row and then the next row will just come out from the same spot. This does not tend to look as good to create realistic scales. Instead, what you want to do is pretty simple. You do a row of connected U's or W's, and then for the next row, you're going to go from the center of each one to the center. Center, 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 center. And you keep working that way, always going from the center point and making sure you touch all the way to that point. And then all of a sudden your scales are actually going to look like they're layered on top of each other and look a lot better. Now do make sure that your little U-shapes touch. You wouldn't want to do this because then it doesn't look like they're actually layering on top of each other. What makes scales work is that they're a little layered, so you got to make sure they touch each other. Another great piece of advice is to add a little shading. Now the shading's just going to come out from the top center of each one. I'm just doing this quickly, but just adding a little bit of shading here at the very top can help really emphasize that they're layered on top of each other. And I definitely like to smudge a bit. See how that's already starting to help? So there's scales. That's one of the easy ones. Another really easy one would be spiky. Spiky, a lot of people just zigzag, but it's more than that. Again, we gotta think layers. So I like to start at the bottom or the front of my object, whatever it is. And we want the triangle, and then we want to start putting more triangles in there and start overlapping them, making them look like they're in front and behind each other. And as things get farther away, they should get smaller as well. Now, if we're thinking classic spikes, we want to keep it random. They're not stacked up perfectly like the scales are, but as they get farther back, they're smaller and smaller. Closer to the bottom or the front, they should be bigger. If you want to take this a step higher, add shadows. Think of these as individual cones. So go on one side of every single one and add shading. Let's say maybe I just go the left side. If I just add some shading down the left side of each one, that's a great place to start for shading. Now I definitely want to go in and I'd smudge these and make it look a whole lot better. But just starting to add a little bit of value can really help. And then as things get farther back, there's going to be more shading in between them too, right? Because it's farther away, so it's going to be a bit darker. So I could add some shading just at the bottoms of them, helping to give that illusion of it going back in space. Okay, so there's spiky. Another classic one that a lot of people like to do would just be holes. Holes is more than just drawing circles or ovals. Yeah, that's a place to start, but it doesn't really look like a hole yet. What's going to make this look like a hole is to make it look 3D. So I want it to look like I'm looking into the hole and I see that thickness of whatever the object is. So what I'll do is on the top half of each, I'll put in a little curved line. I'll try to kind of replicate that curve of the actual edge of the oval. Then what's left behind would get filled in black because this is the hole, so it's poking through. We don't know what's down there. It's a hole into the abyss. And then ideally, this edge here would get a gray. Now, I like to do vertical lines with it. When I shade, that gives that illusion of really going down into space. And you see how all of a sudden that looks like a hole so much more? So adding in that shading and that depth of whatever your object is, that thickness, is really going to help make your whole texture work a lot better. Another good one. How about wood grain? Wood grain's a pretty popular one. So many people just do random little scribbles, and that's not really wood at all. Here's my trick. If I think about, maybe I want to do planks of wood. So I'll have my long boards, and then in each board, let's just ignore that top area up there. In each board, I want to put in a couple knots first. So I want to keep it random, some bigger, some smaller. Maybe some will have a couple, maybe some going off the edge, but some little oval circles for knots. Then work one board at a time And you're doing these curved organic lines. They're very free. So it's going to come up, and as it goes around that circle, it will work its way around. And I kind of go on both sides, and I just keep kind of flowing it down. If there's a big gap, you can add in an extra little line. Okay, maybe this one flows this way. See how that's getting that wood grain? I could even go a lot more extreme with my lines and go sideways with it. Boards aren't always cut exactly the same. Sometimes there'll be those little gaps, that's fine. See how there's little gaps, so I'll put some extras in between them. I'll make that a bit longer. So you guys see how just flowing those curved lines around those dots is going to give you that wood grain. Another classic one a lot of people like to do is fur or hair. For that, it's more than just lines going down. It's all about how you stack them up. So I like to think about, what is my fur or hair on? Let's see, for your assignment, you have it on a finger. So maybe I'll have my thumb coming up here, like I'm drawing a hand, and I want it to look like this is covered in fur. First, I want to think about the direction and the actual form of my object. If it's a thumb, my lines would curve around it, right? So I might give myself some very light lines that curve around it, work my way up, just to use as reference. That will help me out. Now I'm going to do short hair. So kind of coming out of each one, I'll make them all a little bit random. Some will go off the edge, but I'll start layering them up and working my way up, trying to follow that curve. Make sure you're keeping it random. Don't stack them up perfectly. Maybe some hairs go off the edge. Some are curved to the right, some are curved to the left. Just keep in mind with hair or fur, you want to keep the same type of hair or fur throughout the entire thing. So I wouldn't all of a sudden have a super curly hair. That wouldn't make sense. These are more straight. I'm kind of thinking about that curve. As they come to the top, they're all coming out of the top area. Maybe I'll have some hairs standing up. You see how it's really looking like it's curving around that thumb. It's a lot more lines than you realize. If you can see much of that thumb underneath, you really need to add more. And just keep them random, keep them all the same length, and just go crazy with it. Let's see, what's another one? Brick. That's a pretty common one. For brick, I want to start off with horizontal lines. Now, bricks are not checkerboards. I would not just put in some verticals straight in a row. My rows need to be in different spots of each other. So if I think my top row's here, and I see one brick in the middle and two halves. My next one, I go from the middle of each before. Middle, middle. So they're always lining up opposites. Now, that's the basics, but that doesn't look very good like a texture right now. That's just lines. So we want to add some more details to these. Bricks have the mortar in between. So I'm going to take a second and put in kind of these slightly rounded, random rectangles in each spot. And it's okay if there's little gaps in between, because again, that's where that mortar would go, that glue that holds them together. And bricks often have rough edges, so if your lines are a little wobbly, all the better. Once I do that, I like to shade in my mortar first, so all that gap in between each one, I give that a little bit of shading. That'll also help get rid of those helper lines from the very beginning. So I'll do that first. Then when it comes to the bricks themselves, I like to give them some character. Maybe they got some little scribbles, some spots, some holes, and I smudge them out a lot, giving them just some random texture. Now, I'm not putting dark circles, because that just looks like weird spots. I want to really keep light with my little smudges, and keep it random. I'm kind of scribbling my pencil around, and then I smudge it a lot. That helps give it that sort of brick texture. Okay, last one I wanted to show you is woven. So woven textures are great for materials. Now this one takes a bit more effort to it, but I really love how it turns out. What I want to do is I start by lightly drawing in a checkerboard. Let me give myself a pretty big one for this, give myself space. Now, I can't leave it as a perfect checkerboard, because if things are woven, they're going over and under and over and under, and then opposites, right? Under and over. So they're actually looking like they're woven together. So I'll start with one line at a time. I'm going to work vertically. This one is going to be over. Now I want some actual thickness to whatever my object is. So I'm going to put it to the 2. Next one's going to be under, which means we're going to see this one on top. Then we're going to have over, that one's on top, under, which means that one's on top. So I go vertical, then horizontal, vertical, and horizontal. And once I go through a row, I'll go back and I'll connect them so they actually look like they're going over and under each spot. See how it looks like it's going down? Next row, I want to go opposite. So if I started vertical or over, I want to start with under. So I'll do horizontal, then vertical, then horizontal, then vertical, then horizontal. And I'll go back and I'll connect them in with the lines that side. They'll kind of start to come out there. See how it's starting to look like they're going over, under, over, under? And I just keep working that way. If I had horizontal there, I'm going to have vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. And then again, go back, connect. Make sure it looks like your lines are connected to each other. These ones go underneath. I might even give myself some little lines where they start that next row. This one's going to be horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. And let's connect that last row. So you see how they're really starting to look like they're going over, under, over, under? To add to this, you could work some little shading. Anytime something goes under, it's going to be a little bit darker there. So I'm just going to work my way up and down each one. Every time it goes under, I'll put just a little bit of shading. Now ideally, I'd want to have some smooth shading, so it actually looks like it is slowly getting to that value, not just a stripe of gray. But for timing purposes, I'm just putting in quick little stripes. So everyone that goes under, now I need this way. All these ones that go under need a little shadow. So with texture, the more shading and details you can add into things, the better your texture is going to look. Because texture is the way something feels or looks like it would feel. So that means it's three-dimensional things. We could actually pick it up if it was real. So we'd actually see and feel these going over and under. So if we're drawing them, we want to try to replicate it the best we can. And to make something look more realistic, we know we got to add that shading, the value to it. And there are some basic textures for you to try out.